Hello, friends. Today, I am so excited for you to meet Beth Santos. Beth and I met years ago at an event called At the Table. Her co founder of that amazing initiative to bring entrepreneurial women together is a past podcast guest of ours, Rika Elize. You can go back and listen to that wonderful episode and conversation we had. And it's been a long time coming having Beth on this podcast. She has so much incredible wisdom that she shares in this episode. And so I'm so very excited for you to, one, get to know her, feel her energy and her excitement about exploring the world in a transformative way for your individual self, and also in a way that you can be giving back and being part of the world around you. This transformative experience of what it is to be a traveler. Beth is the CEO of Wonderful, which is a travel company focused on amplifying diverse voices and, in particular, creating spaces and places for women in the travel industry to be amplified, heard, and represented. So, in this episode, we talk about so many different aspects of travel, the travel industry, perceptions that we have about the travel industry, how we, especially if you are an American listener, how we as Americans have kind of been positioned in the world as how we go out as travelers. Also, if you're a person of who is interested in history, we talk about the importance of understanding what it is to have been a historical discoverer in lands that were already occupied and resided within by Indigenous people. And so we talk a lot about the importance of keeping that in mind and being really thoughtful and conscious of your impact in places that you go, just as much as you're going to a place to be able to witness, be a part of, and soak in the magic of other cultures. Um, just want to give a couple things because, like, Beth won't amplify these things in her own bio because, we're humble and all. But I just want to gush about her for a little bit. On top of the amazing human being you will meet, Beth is named one of 17 change makers who are shaping the future of travel by Business Insider. She is one of 12 women to follow in Condé Nast Traveler. She is one of the top 20 influential women in Travel Pulse. And to top all that off, she was recently named the godmother of a cruise ship. Like, come on. So if you are somebody that's interested in travel or interested in understanding how we redefine, reclaim our relationship to ourselves as we go out in the world and experience new things, whether that be a mile from your house or 1,000 miles from your house or beyond, this episode is for you. Also, one of my favorite aspects of what we talk about in here is creating and finding community where you are. So, whether that be on the road and travel or at home, Beth and I talk about the importance of finding people to be in connection with, especially after the last few years. And she talks about an incredible investment that her and her husband made in 2021 to purchase a social impact oriented, social justice oriented coffee shop in her hometown. So, without further ado, here is my amazing conversation with Beth Santos. Everyone, I'm so excited for you to meet Beth Santos. I know I've already gushed about her in the intro, but here she is. Beth, welcome to Checkbox Other.
Thanks, Nikki. It's so great to be here.
Oh, it's such a treat to have you. See, already my face is, I already know that my face is going to hurt from smiling so hard, but it's been so good to like see your face after so long. And just your spirit in the room, in the virtual room is so wonderful. So I'm so excited for people to get to know more about you.
I'm so thrilled to be here too. And of course, just as we're talking, the doorbell rings and the dogs are going crazy. So you're getting some real life Beth right now. But no, I like fully expect to do some face mask treatment after this because I think I'm going to be smiling the whole time too.
Yeah, it's a little stretching. We should have done that.
Yeah,
do
some like
calisthenics with the cheek.
I love it. Yep, done.
Well, here's what I usually start the episodes with: is I pass the microphone to the amazing guests that are here and ask for a Cliff Notes version of your story. I call it the twists, the turns, the aha moments to lead you where you are today, doing what you do out in the world.
So the story, there's so many ways to start this. I am from Southern New Hampshire. I went to college outside of Boston and didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And so I studied art history, which I found
Mm.
fascinating and interesting and different, and a different way to see the world. And I honestly wish everybody studied art history, because the more you study it, the more you understand the way people perceive the world and how they affect that sort of like affects emotionally who they are, and what kind of art they produce. And of course, the downside of studying art history is that when you graduate in 2008 in a very terrible economy, art history is especially one of the industries you don't really want to be in, because there's not a lot of job prospects. So I ended up moving. I moved to DC. I had studied abroad in Portugal. It was a completely life-changing experience for me that we may or may not talk about today. And I was connected with my Portuguese heritage, the language, the culture. So I ended up interning for the Embassy of Portugal in DC, and it was there that I came across, in like true DC fashion, like the people that you meet. I came across a friend of a friend at a picnic who ran a nonprofit in a country I had never heard of before called Sao Tome and Principe. And he had an arrangement where he had extra rooms in his guest house, and you could stay there and he'd give you 3 meals a day. And in exchange, you'd go volunteer at his nonprofit, which basically had been an extension of the Peace Corps. He had run the Peace Corps up until the 90s, and then basically stayed in this place and started his own organization, just helping people in Sao Tome with literacy and with computer learning. And I, in my, 22 years of age at the time, was like, that sounds good. Let's do that. So
Yeah.
on a whim, I just moved to Sao Tome sight unseen. I raised some money from friends and family to buy a plane ticket, because they were really, really expensive.
Yeah.
And I ended up over 2 years kind of spending time there, on and off, and working at a local school. And that was my really, I mean, again, I had studied abroad before, but this was like dropping into a place you'd never heard of before, completely on your own, no connection to a local university program or anything, travel. And that actually is kind of where it all began. I started writing about my experiences as a solo woman traveling on her own, and realizing that women's experiences around the world are really different. And when I say different, I don't mean different from men. I mean different in every place that we go. Every society and every culture has different expectations around women, different gender norms. And to be confronted with that face to face was really changing for me. So I started a blog. That blog kind of followed me through my professional career. I ended up working in international development for a few years. And then I moved to Chicago in maybe 2011. And I went to business school, because literally, like, all this just sounds made up, but I was like, I didn't know what I wanted to study. I knew I wanted to study something, maybe international development. Chicago didn't have that. And I was like, I don't know, business school, that sounds good. Why not? Let's try it. Had no business experience whatsoever, had no, knowledge about the business world. Ended up getting my MBA, and during that time came across the whole field of entrepreneurship, and realized that this blog I had been working on was actually a business, and that business had real customers and was meeting a real need and had real value. And through that had created what today is Wonderful, which is an international community of thousands of travelers and travel content creators, people with blogs, with Instagram channels, with social media channels, who are changing the face of travel. We do a lot to advocate for more inclusive travel industry. We do a lot of storytelling about destinations using a diverse array of content creators on like a marketing campaign or a press trip. And then we have a whole membership community with chapters around the world for women travelers to have a local place to tap into when they go somewhere, and have a local community to be like that home for somebody when they're in a place like I was that they'd never been to before. And I think Wonderful has been like my life's work. It has also launched a whole bunch of things for me, kind of personally building my own brand as an advocate for women, and equity and responsibility for women in travel. And all sorts of like fun adventures that have gone from that. But really, it just started from me not knowing what I wanted to do in my life and just following a trail. And here I am today.
Oof. I love that. I love that. And of course, I just went to business school. And of course, yeah, let's try that. You want to go to a place I've never been, stay in your house 3 meals a day? Cool. Yeah, let's do that.
Yes.
Like, I think there's something so much the testament of that kind of things. I think of that like Shonda Rhimes book, The Year of Yes. Like that's what it
Yeah.
feels like. That you were like, don't know what it is. Feels kind of cool. Yeah, let's try
Why
it.
not?
And
Let's do
it's
it.
amazing
Mhm.
what doors open on the other side of that.
I am yeah,
Blah, blah, blah.
I never thought of myself in that way, and then one time I took a skiing lesson and my ski instructor, it was like awful. Like I hated it. I never this is in my adult life. Like
I've done
I
the same.
cannot ski.
Mm-mm.
And I remember my ski instructor kind of looking at me and he was like, Beth, you're an emotional risk taker. You're not really a physical risk taker. And I like so identified with that. Like I was like, you were absolutely right. I mean, I don't know why I was just born with like a risk tolerance emotionally that I'm just like, yeah, sure. I'm just going to like quit everything I'm doing and move halfway across the world. Why not? What could go wrong? But
Yeah.
you try to get me to ski on like the bunny slope and it's like, no way. I will hang out and have a cocktail in the après ski lounge. Like I will not. So it is funny, like reflecting on myself and like, yeah, why not go to business school? Sure.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
try it and see what
Yeah.
happens.
It's so funny. First of all, I feel like adult you and I on the Bunny Hills. I wish we were there together. We would have had a great time. We would have had a great time being like, this is over, right? Can we just go? Can we have some of that spiked hot cocoa? Uh, it's I hear you on the lack of physical,
Love it.
and also it's so funny because I think when we talk about bravery, oftentimes and courage, oftentimes it's in the face of something absolutely awful, or it's like jumping off a cliff. And
Yeah.
oftentimes in the kind of emotional side of it, you don't always have the concrete visual of the actual risk that's being taken or the bravery
Yeah.
and the courage that needs to be there.
Yeah.
In retrospect, sure,
Yeah.
but in the moment, that kind of fortitude is there's not a big bicep to show for it, but
Yeah.
it is
You're
it's a
right.
really powerful thing,
Yep. And
and
sometimes it
contagious.
doesn't, and it sometimes it doesn't pay off. Like you're saying, you don't have a big bicep to show for it. I mean, sometimes, that bravery does not go, like awarded, right? You take a
Yeah,
risk and it doesn't work well. But like that doesn't mean that you weren't strong to begin with for doing it and trying it.
yeah, yeah. Oh, I love that. Okay, I aside from being an adult that stinks at skiing, uh, was there any other time in your life where you felt other or different? Can you have any stories that you'd like to bring forth? They're amazing.
Oh,
But I would have held your hand on that bunny hill and we would have been other together. So just so
oh, yay. Yes, in so many times in my life. I mean, I think a lot about when you ask this question, I think a lot about two things. One is kind of the story that I've told of, being a traveler. And this thing really drives me nuts is the fact that, here I am in Sao Tome feeling like I was one of 4 Americans in the country. The country has had, oh, there's the dogs again.
okay.
The country had 150,000 people. So the country had 150,000 people. I was one of 4 Americans in country. I was like one of a handful of white people. And so for sure, I think, there was a moment of kind of being other. But the thing that really drove me nuts was that women in travel are considered this cute niche of the travel industry. And we are not. We actually make 85% of the decisions in travel. We are 52 or 55% of hospitality employees, which is the majority. And but unfortunately, a lot of the decisions are made by men and white men. And if you look up, you can literally Google solo traveler right now. You're going to see, yes, you will see a lot of women, but you're going to see a lot of one very specific woman. She's 20, she's skinny, she's blonde, she's able-bodied, she's Western, she's got her arms reached out like into the sky, embracing the world. And that's it. That's the only person we talk to as the person who's supposed to travel. So I think, that is the one thing I think is very important is this fact that, being other and feeling other. I mean, it's such a socially constructed thing to say, oh, you're like abnormal, when actually the abnormal person is the one that's showing up in the stock photo, really, honestly, that's the minority. But I think personally, I grew up Portuguese American in a state that is also very white. I have a lot of mixed feelings about my own identity. I've had people who have come up to me, Portuguese people, we don't really know what to do with them, honestly. I've had people come up to me and say, like, you're brown and you need to own it and you need to, like, and then I've had other people being like, let me remind you, which is true, the Portuguese were the colonizers, like big time, so it's like, what do you do with that information when, the history of your country is so unknown, like conventionally unknown, that you're sort of positioned a certain way because of maybe how you look or because of what your last name is, but actually you were your history is that you were the colonizers, you were the people who are doing the most harm. And that's always been funny, growing up in southern New Hampshire. I was, like, unfortunately one of the brownest kids I know, and again, I am not brown by any stretch of the imagination. But it was like a very exotic thing to be Portuguese, and then kind of growing up throughout my life and seeing actually the impact of the Portuguese culture has made me an other in another way, in a way that's, that I have actually othered other people, like the people of my history have othered so many other people. And
Yeah.
and it's this really interesting thing that I reflect on very often.
It's so the kind of nuance of having to hold both realities in the same
Hmm.
recounting of the history and the lines that you came from, and also occupying the space that you're in, right? Kind of carrying
Yeah.
both the past, present, and the present forward, and then also how do I stand as who I am right now? Interacting with people that are like, you're the brownest person here, and also, oh, you are the ultimate colonizer. You are that's where the inception of the transatlantic slave trade came from. It's funny, we
Right.
had a guest, Naki G, who actually runs the African Tour of Lisbon, that my sister and I
Oh,
went on.
cool.
Oh,
So cool.
if you haven't been on it, I
Dying
highly,
to go. That would
oh
be okay. Good. Hook me up.
yeah, you're gonna. It was amazing. See, chills all through my body as I'm saying it.
Mm,
But it is. I think it's so important. One of the things, and I don't know, join me on this little journey real quick. But one of the things that I learned about my ethnic background, my the white side of my family in the last few years is, I grew up thinking I was like British, maybe Dutch. There was, it's kind of like we're just
mm.
white. It's like, no. What
Yeah. What is it?
if
Yeah.
I'm asked what are you every day? Can we take a minute just to figure out kind of the white lineage here? And what I found out was that I actually am German. I had no
Oh,
idea.
cool. Hmm.
I'm Welsh and German, and I think a bit again British, English. So it's funny because I was like, wait a second. First of all, no one has ever said that to me at all, that we are
Mm.
German. And also, I think of when we think of the German race of people and the way that we learn conventional history, as you mentioned it, is that it
Yeah.
is there is the, especially in American education, the oppressor, the
Yeah.
oppressive dynamic. And also, one of the things that's so fascinating to me as I look at that is the German culture in particular has done some version of looking at itself. And I think that
Yeah.
we are in
It
a
has.
culture here in America where we are being forced to look at a lot of things, and our
Yeah.
tendency to create blinders is so significant. But I think that when you are somebody that has the ability to recognize where your roots came from and the complicated history, it does allow you to see the nuance of the now and the ability to kind of create reparative bonds as we move forward. And so there's a whole lot of
Hmm.
kind of jargony stuff,
Hmm.
but I think there was a part of when I discovered that was like, oh, okay. I've been doing this work. I had no idea. I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm actively trying to shine lights on oppressive dynamics that are happening, yes, in America, but all around, that have formed who we are, and have even our internal versions of thinking that we're not enough because we're other. Where is that coming from? Why,
Yeah.
and how important is it to see the human side of all of it, of
Yeah.
the folks that were the oppressors, and what and how that dehumanized them at the same time as creating systems of oppression that dehumanize the folks that were being oppressed. And so
Yeah.
allowing that kind of full circle element, I feel like actually is what at least for me, creates a path to healing in some way
Yeah.
that doesn't make us feel like, well, the only way for us to exist separate from each other, and I'm a good guy and you're a bad guy, because both of those titles don't make us feel human.
Yeah. Oh, so well said. And I think that is such a key part of all of this, is that the nuance is the thing that's like the most important here, and it's so easy for us. And generalizations, we all know that they spread farther and faster, so it's really easy to like get on a soapbox and say X is wrong, Y is right, Z is, and I think it takes a much more thoughtful approach to really examine things from all sides and to look at all the different nuances that are involved. And it's a harder story to tell, honestly, because you expect and need people to be thinking about things in different ways. But I think it's more important because that's what has gotten our country to be so polarized in a lot of different ways, is just sort of standing on the soapbox of our perspective and not listening to the outside. And it can be really tricky, to hold all those truths at once, especially when they're like very much clashing with each other.
Yeah.
But I see a lot with my kids now, because I have a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old. And my daughter, who's biracial, my husband's Black, is having a lot of questions about who she is. And we're like, well, you're half mommy and half daddy. Like, and she's like, so what color? Like, am I peach? So she's gone to like, she's peach. She's decided that she's peach, mommy's white, daddy's Black. And but then she's like, like, but what am I like more of, and who do I feel more comfortable around? And you can see these like questions in her head, and she just doesn't have, and honestly, none of us has the language to really talk about it, with her. It is really confusing.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like there's a part of me that's like, hi, you're talking about 5-year-old me. How are you?
Oh,
I think there's so much power in even just creating the space for the conversation.
yeah.
That, again, as I was saying about historically it being kind of shunned subjects for us to talk about these historical separations.
Yeah.
And then when you have a human being that is the combination of those two things, it
Yeah.
can be like, well, you can't deny the reality that these two things come together, that there is humanity and love that creates those two things coming together. And so how do we rectify kind of the story we're told?
Yeah.
It's so funny. Oh, I wasn't expecting.
I know. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to call you and you can talk to Nora. You can give her a good talking to.
No. You're like trying to figure it out. But I very much remember the crayon kind of conversation, like which crayon is my color. And it's funny because my mom laughs about it because I used to color her yellow because like white was no color.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And then even for my dad. And so just the kind of, before your brain has all the amazing pathways that it's built as a kid, and it's very linear, and you're like, wait, I don't understand. I'm being given 6 colors and none of them are appropriate for my reality. Yeah. You're still asking me to color my family. So what do I do? Yeah. And it really is showing you at such a young age that all the answers aren't always given to you on the test. Not all the options are always right in front of you. And so I think the curiosity, and I always talk about this with coaching clients, but like everybody I talk to, I'm always like, if you allowed yourself to be that little kid that asks why more versus how, I don't know about you, but being growing up, being told that like asking why was so annoying and can the kids just shut up and be obedient in school and like memorize to learn, not question to learn. That the ability to have that curiosity actually creates our ability to see that nuance that we're talking about. One of the things that was so fascinating for me in particular in the African tour of Lisbon with Naki was, and it, not revolutionary, but also nobody had said it out loud before to me, was this idea of discoverers in travel. And that's a big word that we use. And it's so
discovering someplace that somebody else is already living. Right. Yeah.
Just because it's your first time doesn't mean it never existed before. But it's so funny because it makes me think of Nora, 5-year-old being like, wow, look at me discovering all these things. And also the
Yeah.
history and even the reality of today of like the appropriation of American and Western culture in places that have
Yeah.
had much more deeply rooted realities, cultures, and depth and breadth of wisdom.
Hmm.
As you, as like you do this work in creating community for people that are going out in the world and experiencing other cultures and connecting with one another and forging paths forward as creators, how do you hold space for both that feeling of discovery, like individual
Yeah.
discovery, but also the discovery of many different cultures kind of coming together?
Yeah. Well, and let me see if I can answer this question not in like 6 hours, because it is really, really super good. And I think, to your point about discovery, one of the things that we have been saying a lot lately in the space of DEI and the space of, responsible travel is like we're saying, like, you're not discovering, it's somebody else's home, but also like let's take a moment to recognize that you are discovering for yourself. You're not saying you're discovering on behalf of the entire world necessarily, although the Portuguese did in, the 1500s. But nowadays, when we use that word, we're talking about, I'm learning something for myself that I didn't know before. And I think one of the things that is really important to us with Wonderful, and that's kind of been at the heart of who we've been as a blog, when we first started, is just having the conversation and having the dialogue and being okay with that. And, things like cancel culture and things like, saying I'm right and you're wrong. Those are things that we kind of try to push back against at Wonderful, because you're right. There are nuance, I don't want to be like, there's reasons that people thought that way, but like that originated from somewhere. There's some concept, everything has some little piece, little nugget of maybe truth or, perception that it started from, and sometimes we twist each other's words so much that, I try to say something, and to you, because of your lived experience and because of the way you've been raised, you perceive that same sentence a very different way than, my intended way. And we're always up against that with each other, I think, when communicating, and we're doing the best we can. And I think that that's one of the things that we always start with Wonderful is, as long as you're approaching this conversation with kindness, with empathy, we want to have the conversation with you. And not everybody, by the way, wants that mental or emotional burden, and that's okay, but I think that's something that we try to do, is make sure that we're creating that space so people can be vulnerable and they can be open with each other. But I also think that, along with that, constantly checking in with ourselves and making sure that as many voices as possible are represented and at the table is at the table is how we know each other and how we learn and how we make sure that we're kind of like pushing this bar forward a little bit. And so that is where, we have started doing things like content creator campaigns, which these are, so to kind of like give people who maybe don't know this concept a little bit of understanding. So a lot of times, if you're a destination, if you're a tourism board and you're marketing your destination, you use what we call influencer marketing. You'll work with content creators and influencers to tell a certain story. Well, now, much like they sometimes organize fam trips or familiarization trips for travel agents, now they also organize these trips for content creators. So they'll get like a group of creators together, they'll pay for their travel, they'll have them come to their destination, and then those creators will create content around it. And sometimes it's individually, and sometimes it's together. And what happens, the unfortunate part of a lot of this is, when you are a busy and underfunded tourism marketing professional, oftentimes these are, the department has like one, if five people in it, like one person in it. And so when they're thinking about how am I going to tell the story about my destination using content creators, they either, it's usually like they're just kind of tapping into whatever network they already have, right? Who do I know that can do this? And that's where that inclusion issue becomes a real problem, because oftentimes the people that traditionally are people that maybe look like you or act like you or, have some mutual connection with you. And so what we're trying to do is sort of step away from that and introduce you to people who are different and not like you and different from each other, so that you're getting a lot of different perspectives, and they share one singular story together. Here's 6 women that we took to Peru on this women's expedition with Intrepid Travel, and we're going to have them show this experience through their eyes. And only they can do that. You can't tell that story for anyone else. And so I think as much as we can lift a variety of different voices and kind of not present them, but give them a chance to be highlighted by one of these brands, the more we're telling that variety of stories. And I think, again, it really comes down to just making sure that we're having as many different people as we can in the room, and helping them, harness the opportunities that they deserve to have.
Yeah.
And that's a really critical part, I think, of a lot of this.
Yeah, and it's funny because I feel like in the midst of that, there's the diversity of story. Then also, as somebody consuming the information, shows you that there's a pocket for yours too.
Exactly.
And also at the same time, what I'm hearing in the underpinnings of what you're saying is this shift from, and this is this is what I say about a lot of things, but this shift from like transactive interactions with places
Yeah.
to kind of transformational interactions. I think a lot of times when we think about travel and we think about our world of consumerism here in America, that oftentimes it's about, and this is kind of that discoverer mentality, let me go to a place, let me
Yep.
buy the things I want, let me
Yep.
stake my flag in the ground, my claim in the ground, and then let me either, again, we've had a lot in Portugal in particular, had a lot of this with the golden visa, let me buy a part of this so now I
Yep.
claim and own part of it and bring it
Yep.
back home, or let me tell all my people to come and make this as comfortable for me and my reality as possible. And so I think as you're talking about kind of diversifying the story and being
Mm-hmm.
very intentional about the group, it's actually creating spots and places for there to be that individual discovery while also honoring the space and the place that you're in, that it doesn't need to be changed or saved or
Yep.
adjusted for to be more palatable for your culture to come in. It's really what and how does this show you who you are as a human on this big globe that we're in, not necessarily how can you make this place more like your home.
Oh, absolutely. And I think so. Joanna Haugen, who's an amazing and very outspoken person who is a lover and top critic of travel. I think
Mm,
critics are deep lovers of something and critic of travel. And she says, stop calling places destinations. They're not destinations, they're places, right? That's somebody's home,
yeah.
right? That's somebody's workplace. And I think, so I'm working on a book, and it's called, working title is Wander Woman. I think that's what it's going to end up being. It's coming out in January 2024.
Yes.
And it is the book that I wish, Beth at 22 years old had gotten. And this is what it's not. It is not a solo travel guide that has, like top 5 things to pack, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's in there. Don't worry. But it is much more talking about breaking down the myths of who solo travel is for, why the media portrays them that way. It talks a lot about confidence. It talks a lot about, unfortunately, a lot of times when women of a whole plethora of ages, share that they want to go on a trip by themselves, their families are kind of like, oh, is it dangerous? Are you going to be okay? So it's kind of pushing back on, all right, well, let's talk about why we've been saying solo female travel is dangerous. And is it really? And, it's that book that I wish kind of everyone got. And, but it also talks about being a good traveler, and it talks about who is travel for and why, and who has it conventionally been for. And let's talk about the dynamics of the fact that, being able to go wherever you want for the most part is a huge privilege in itself. Some people are not able to travel at all. Some people are forced to travel against their will. Like, let's talk about, what that means. And I think you're right. The thing that is particularly special about traveling alone, I think, is that you learn about the world, you learn about yourself, and then you learn about yourself in the greater context of the world. And I think it is really important. And when you're traveling alone, it is the best opportunity to see all of that stuff up close, to see how, you're not just going to a place. And I think a lot of women sort of understand this when they travel on their own. You're not just going to a place and sort of absorbing and consuming, like you're saying. Other people are also perceiving you. You are having an effect. Your mere presence is having an effect on the culture that you're in,
Yeah.
whether that is a monetary effect, whether that is just, we talk about other, like seeing somebody who looks really different and how that affects a local community. To see a woman traveling on her own might look different from what everyone else looks like. And if you come across situations, which I certainly have, where I see something that to me deep down ethically is like completely wrong, should I change that? Is that my responsibility as a traveler to change something that is 2000 years of embedded culture in somebody else's life? At what point do I have to say to myself, you are a visitor, you are here to learn, you are challenging the way you see the world, you are learning about yourself, you're trying something new. There are going to be things that you're going to love. You're going to have this eat, pray, love adventure and eat tons of pasta and meet some gorgeous Brazilian man. You're also going to have moments of true discomfort where you feel like these things are wrong. And that is, again, like holding these like competing things together in one space and saying, it's not going to be all perfectly rosy. And it's probably also not going to be all like totally dangerous. And you will have an impact on the place that you visit, much like that place that you visit will have an impact on you. And it's holding all of these things at once and seeing, how you react to things and learning about yourself, and also recognizing that you should not be going into other people's cultures and trying to change them, and then I will get off my soapbox. But the other thing that I'm spending a lot of time talking about is like volunteering abroad, responsible travel. In some places, the best thing that you can do for a local community is not to go volunteer at a school for a day and leave, but it's to like literally go to the beach and buy a cocktail and support, a local business, or like go out to eat somewhere. Sometimes being a tourist is precisely the thing that you are supposed to do in somebody else's home, because you're supporting the local economy versus trying to sort of impose, your own expectations of what your travel should be on somebody else. So it's more people need this stuff. That's why I'm writing about it.
Well, it's so funny because as you were speaking about kind of holding the two realities that seem so different from each other, that is the bicep, right? That we're witnessing the building of that muscle. And it's funny as you're talking about this. So I went to Portugal, so much Portugal. But I went to Portugal actually twice. I went in the fall by myself, and in the spring I was went to a wedding that getting COVID, didn't go to the wedding. Anyway, first pocket was by myself for 6 weeks. And it was such a transformative experience. It was the first time that I had traveled internationally by myself without a purpose or work or conferencey type thing.
For 6 weeks?
For 6 weeks.
In Portugal, or did you like go other places? Way to go.
Yeah. And it was a little outside of Lisbon too. So there was no Americanization or Westernization of the
It's very Portuguese
of the experience. And it was me and a bunch of Portuguese grandmas hanging out. Nobody spoke English where I was. And so,
where were you? Do you remember?
Algés. It's like 15 minutes outside of Lisbon.
Cool.
The Taos River.
Oh my God, I love it.
It was wonderful. And it was, it was one of those kind of like your door opening. Yeah, sure. My cousin had said to me, hey, we're not staying at our place. Do you want to go? It's just sitting there. And I was like, yeah, I've been COVID quarantine life. What can I? So it was still very, I was still very thoughtful. Again, Portugal had a very high percentage of vaccination rate. Like there was a lot of, and it's a super safe place.
Yes.
So the reason I'm sharing this is it was I didn't know what to expect, but it was such a reflection to me of that the world can be a very different place depending on where you are. And yes, in America, you go to different places and you have that same experience. But being in a place that is, I'll say socialist by the way that they frame their government, but also very religious in a lot of the construct of things. Also not being, it's funny as you saying, feeling and being seen and having an impact. This particular experience showed me that how liberating it was to be able to walk down the street and nobody be paying attention to anything I was doing, nobody reacting to who I am. There was no, relatively speaking, there was no catcalling.
Yeah.
There was this ability to kind of experience the world without the armor that I've had to
Yeah.
have on a lot. And so it
Yeah.
was even just bearing witness through my eyes to that reality of living was like its own respite in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, but also had you grappling with like, okay, my, who am I? What is my place in the world? Where do I want to be? All of that kind of internal discovery
Yeah.
that created a sense of awe, but also created a sense of displacement. And so
Yeah.
being able to hold all of that in the same moment of being by myself, not speaking the language, and being like, well, if something happens, I don't even know how to go to the hospital, right? And then having that same energy you were talking about like my parents being like, oh, this is safe, and being like, actually, it's really safe. And also, I
Yeah.
know what you mean. We're a whole ocean away if anything. Got it.
Right.
But
Right.
the importance, I think, of honoring and acknowledging kind of that personal growth, discovery, renaissance of sorts that can happen in these experiences. But also, I think when I'll say America, but we have this uh, message that we are given that women are not safe in this world, right? And in a lot of places, women are a
Yeah.
lot less safe than they are in America.
Absolutely. Hmm.
As you're talking about creating this incredible book that everybody mark your calendar,
My
January
calendar.
24. But you created this entire community for women to feel connected to one another in a world that tells us we're not safe. How do you kind of rectify or at least approach that kind of feeling of the vulnerability of being in a female presenting or a woman's body?
Mm. Yeah, it's it's like the theme. So the theme of these calls are Portugal and nuance, and
I know,
and
I
it is
know.
all a nuance. And by the way, I know you were saying nobody was bothering you in Portugal, but I guarantee there were a bunch of Portuguese grandmas like, "Que é que ela
Talking
tá
about me.
fazer? What is
Oh,
this
for
girl
sure.
doing? Is she by
Yeah,
herself?
exactly.
Are we sure that she's okay? What's happening?"
There was a moment where a
I
police
know they
officer
were
came to
like
the door.
clucking.
Yes, yes,
They're
yeah.
all talking
People
to each
were
other.
seeing, but they weren't seeing in the way that felt like it didn't feel like you were getting scanned, even if it was happening behind a curtain. I didn't see. Cool. Didn't
Right.
feel it.
There you go. Yeah. They're just all, yeah, they're like hopping on the phone, like, did you see this girl? Is she by herself? What's going on over here? But
Forgot
you
I
know,
really. Come on.
yeah, come on. But you're right. I mean, I think, I think one thing that's interesting is we are both we are telling two stories at Wonderful that sometimes conflict. The
Mm,
first is that travel is not unsafe, and that this whole concept of travel being unsafe for women is hogwash, which is true in some ways. But then we're also saying, but just in case, here's a community of women to help you out. So
yeah,
it's kind of
yeah.
like, okay, so like, what is it? But again, to that point, it's like, it's not black and white, and I think that's the main part. I think a lot of people in the early days of Wonderful, and they'd be like, well, like, do they, do you, how are you making sure that these women are safe? Are you like verifying their, are you doing background checks in this community? Like, how are you making, and I was like, look, you can still have somebody like who's fully background checked and vetted who still like commits some horrendous act of murder. Okay. So like we don't know what the future holds. This is not Minority Report. Like we will never really know. But the point here is not necessarily saying here's a verified safe group of women.
Right.
This is saying imagine you show up in a place by yourself. The marginal benefit of knowing even one person who can say, hey, here's how to use the bus system. Hey, there's a really good cafe near where you are, is so valuable.
Huge. Yeah.
And yeah, here's how to say, 10 words my local language, whatever. And I think that's what we're creating is we're not necessarily saying like, here's this like super ultra verified network of women who are going to help you out. Like you have to, these are strangers. This is the internet. We have to, kind of work with each other here. But what we are saying is here's a community of women who get it and who have been through this the way you have. And, there is a payment to be a member. So we also do take that as a barrier to entry. Most people don't just like pay a membership fee every month in order to, do like horrible things, although, you know, there's always exceptions.
Right.
But then we also have local chapters, which I think is like a really great part of it too, is if you don't want to meet with another woman one-on-one, you know, there's a few things you can do. You can connect with the online network and just ask questions, or you can connect with the local chapter. And there's like 12 women who are all going out for dinner, who are local, who you can just tap into whenever you go somewhere. And so I think, you know, we are recognizing, oh, and by the way, safety looks different for everybody, right? I might say that this is like a totally safe place. You might go to the exact same place and be like, everybody's staring at me because of the way I look and I don't feel comfortable, or there's no accessibility here and I cannot get my wheelchair around. This is not safe for me, or, you know, any number of things. And I think even safety itself is like such a overgeneralized, like whose safety are we talking about, you know? And
Yeah.
I still remember seeing there was a survey that came out from this like major women's travel community who I really have a lot of respect for, but the survey itself, it was a safety survey, and the questions were about places that you've been and how comfortable you felt in those places.
Mm,
And I just hated that, because then there was like a report released like, oh, women felt uncomfortable in like this certain place. And I was like, first of all, you cannot judge a whole country. Like, this is what I talk about a lot in my book too. You cannot judge a whole country. If you looked at the United States of America, it's like, you know, comparing like Chicago to like the middle of nowhere, Maine, like to Florida, like you can't do that, you know, and
even
there's
in a
so
state,
many
let's
different,
even
even in
say
a
it.
state,
Yeah,
right? Even
yeah. Or
Massachusetts, like
street by
New
street
York
in a
State,
city.
right?
Yeah,
Somebody
yeah,
said New York and they're talking about like Brooklyn or like the Adirondacks. Like it's
right.
literally, there's so many. And so, so that's the first thing. Second thing is I, my gut feeling, which is a total just, you know, guess, is that the people who were polled were probably not as diverse as they should have been, because, you know, and that's a problem in itself. If you ask like a whole group of 20-year-old white women how they feel in certain places, how problematic can that become, you know, to have that has nothing to do with how safe the place actually is.
Right.
That has everything to do with your embedded biases around income and race and, you know, places that you're just not familiar with and don't know. You know, maybe
Yeah.
you're walking down a perfectly beautiful part of Europe, but it's crumbly and you're not used to crumbly buildings because you're American, and you're like, oh my gosh, this place is like super low income, but it's actually not, you know, and like,
Right.
who cares even if it is? And
Right.
so it's just that stuff. I mean, people's perceptions around safety, it's all different for everybody. You know, everyone has a different risk level. Everyone has a different tolerance. Everyone has different lived experiences. For me, going to, you know, the state of Georgia is totally fine. For other people, they'll be like, I'm not going to the south of the US. That's ridiculous. You know,
Yeah.
so that is all, again, like we have to hold these nuances even more, because
Yeah.
those conversations. And so I think that's where Wonderful does play a really important role, which is, you know, there is no place on this earth that is like, you know, uh, unsafe for everyone or safe for everyone. Everyone has their own perceptions of what safety means. And being able to give people the understanding and the language and the community to support each other and to make educated decisions based on that, and to push back, you know, on some of these lists that are like top safe countries for women to travel. I'm like, that's such BS. Top
Yeah.
safe countries, how could you possibly even do that? And like, why are you feeding into that clickbait of being like, yeah, let's just rank a bunch of countries, and by the way, most of them are like, you know, white, Anglo-Saxon, English speaking, right? Like that's, but like, what if it's, you know, if it's somebody who's coming from Botswana, are they going to find the like white English speaking countries to be like the safe? I don't know. Like it's just, it's all coming from this place of perception and expectation, and from like a dominant culture that has been sculpting these narratives over the years. And so I think with Wonderful, it's like, let's just get rid of that and let's talk in an open way about what we've seen. And let's try to connect as many women as we can from all around the world, so that when I'm going to Mexico City, I'm going and I'm hanging out with Pam, who's our Mexico City chapter director. And she's taking us to her neighborhood, Xochimilco, which a lot of people might say, take it off your list because it's like really local, or it's like not like tour. And she's like taking you onto her trajinera boat, and her parents are making you breakfast, and you're having like the best time ever. And let's open the world to each other a little bit more. Okay, I'm getting off now. I'm getting off my soapbox.
That was it, but it is. I mean, that's the God, I love this so much. I think that understanding not only that a word can mean different things to different people, that your perception versus your real lived experience can shape your experience with that word, and then also your lived experience can evolve, especially from a safety perspective of regulating your nervous system to being used to something new. I think, again, after the last few years in particular, I'm curious on your take on this. Like, a lot of things that were normal felt safe, normal in your hometown, outside your house, did not feel safe. And so as people are charting the path out of their home and getting on planes, trains, automobiles into new spaces and traveling again, how has that kind of evolved with the travel industry in particular? I know, obviously, I'm sure that there was a big impact on your organization and all the collaborators and partners you had as kind of travel was shuttered. And now people are, I mean, the record of like booking flights and getting out, the kind of mass, like, get me out of here feeling that happened. That a lot of airlines are having a hard time with, and a lot of tourist spots are like, okay, you were here, yes, we want you, but also we're all trying to learn how to kind of transition back into, if not towards, a new normal. So what has that felt like?
There is so much. It's like travel is just managing this demand it's so inconsistent. It's like, first we're not traveling at all. Now everybody's trying to get out there. And I think one thing that COVID did do for us that I hope that people can remember this lesson and like keep it close to them. And I know we're all going to forget because we're flaky as a society across the board, is travel only consists of three things. It consists of challenging your preconceptions, trying something new, and getting uncomfortable. And you can travel, you can have deep, fundamentally changing travel experiences, sometimes within a mile from your house, if you're willing to open yourself up. And that is one thing that I think COVID actually did for a lot of people, was it forced them to find moments of travel really close to home because they could not go anywhere else.
Right.
And now we're kind of like, I want the real thing, But it can be, it's like when you like keep a kid away from their birthday for like 3 years, and then you like give them like 100 presents, and they're like, and then they're like sick because they ate a bunch of candy. Right. Exactly. It's like, we're in that moment right now where we're just like tearing the presents open, and we're not even thinking about, what we're doing. And I think it's resulting in a lot of over demand, like a mix, because the industry is still recovering, by the way. Like, we have this festival that we run for women travelers called Wanderfest that kicked off last year. And it was amazing. We actually had to cancel it this year because nobody would sponsor it, because nobody had money. So like, the travel industry is still really struggling in a lot of ways, but then like the demand is really high, and it's just not catching up yet. And so I think, it's really important for us to be thoughtful and intentional about our time and where are we going. And, we all know the stories of like some of those places that had experienced over tourism, which during COVID had started to like come back and, get like better again. And, the like air was cleared, the smog was cleared in some places, like the fish started coming back into like rivers that were over polluted. And let's not forget, the impact that we do have. And I see a lot of people actually who are leaders in travel who are saying, I know one, Nori Quintos, who was an editor for Nat Geo. Yes, I think it was Nat Geo. And she was a keynote at our event for travel content creators. And it was funny because I found out after the fact that she only does 6 flights a year, which is a big deal for somebody who's in her position.
Yeah.
And because of that, because she limits herself, because she wants to limit her carbon footprint, those 6 trips that she takes, those are important. She's really thinking a lot about where am I going and why, and what is the most important thing for me, and what are the things that are not important or could be, reached in a different way or whatever.
Yeah.
But I hope that we all do more of that, that we're not just sort of grabbing at like every opportunity to get out there that we can. I truly believe that we should be thinking more about, what do I really want to see? Where do I really want to go? How can I make sure that I'm, having a really rich experience rather than just kind of frivolously, checking things off of a list. And I think that's and I think, and then I'll stop. And then I think the other thing that we are really hungry for, that we have seen at Wonderful, is human connection, like in-person human connection. That's the thing that we've really missed. And so, we had a lot of online stuff with Wonderful over the last couple of years. We did like online events and virtual tours and everything, but people really just want to be around people again.
Yeah.
And we've even seen this. We've been on tour with the Travel and Adventure Show, having like booths in different cities and speaking on the show, which is a big consumer event. And the thing that is the most popular is actually our local chapter meetups. People are like, "Oh, you're doing a meetup? Yeah, we want to go." Like
Yeah.
they're just,
Yeah.
we're just hungered, we're starving for human interaction and for
Yeah.
meaningful interaction, and to have our time back, but to be able to do that and truly connect with somebody face to face, which is just irreplaceable. And it's now, and then I'm okay, and now I'm really going to stop. It's also one of the reasons why last year in 2021, June of 2021, my husband and I bought a coffee shop,
Yes.
which is like the most fascinating thing, because it is like the most analog of analog worlds. And I'm like a digital entrepreneur, and people come to this cafe because they want to see another person. They go in, this is a cafe there's like 20 tables, there's seating for 64. And people go to this cafe to meet with somebody. And you don't realize like how big of a deal that is until you're there watching it every day. It's like people come to ULA very intentionally because they're like, I want to have a coffee meeting with you in person, face to face. And that hunger for like that in-person connection, it has never been greater, in my opinion, than it is these days. But we also are kind of like dealing with the fact that we have limited time and we have so many things we want to do. And so it's been really wild seeing that from like the local hospitality perspective, and from like the travel trends perspective of like how people are rethinking their relationships, their travels, what they're doing with their time, how they're balancing work and life. And and I hope that people remember to just pace themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, it's so funny. That was the thing that kept popping in my brain, is like, we are connected human beings. Like, that's, humans in general are intended to
Yeah.
be connected to one another in some way. And we were forced to be separate in a lot of ways. Of course, people were forced, maybe you were
Yeah.
super connected to the people in your household, but, and
Yeah.
also like, we are human beings that are built from community. The way that we are the human race that we are is that we came together to learn and to grow and to be able to share knowledge. And the fact that we had such a strict break of that, with, so physical break of that, but then again psychological break of thinking that everyone's a threat to your survival, makes it
Mhm.
really, really
Yeah.
challenging to then re-enter the world and say, okay, it's safe again.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling vulnerable, and I'm feeling
Yeah.
vulnerable in the part of myself that wants to be connected with people. But like, I've built a shield on top of any other shield that I've had to build
Yeah.
interpersonally to be able to do this. And so if I'm asking you to go for coffee, that's a
Mhm.
lot more than just coffee. And
Yeah.
maybe I don't have the stamina that I used to have 5 coffee dates. This is my one that
Right.
I can do. And it's a whole lot of meaning, and it holds a whole lot of risk, but
Yeah.
also reward and potential. And that kind of boomerang of it all is so important. And again, I think that the way we operate as humans, especially in response to harm, going back
Yeah.
to kind of that selective history where we learn very specific things, and oftentimes it's not the dehumanized violence we
Yeah.
and harm we inflict on each other. We are in a spot right now where it's like, okay, that was painful, harmful, COVID, separation. Let's just get back to normal. And so, like,
Yeah.
let's just like kind of lobotomize that part of our brain that
Yeah.
actually needs to slowly reintegrate and
Yeah.
to dip a toe and feel like it's okay. And let's just get back into it.
Yep.
And we can't do that because
No.
in the reality, we are the whole version of ourselves. So when we're showing up
Yeah.
with that and ignoring it, we're not able to heal and grow and be able to have generative, long-standing, substantive relationship with one another and with ourselves. Um,
Right.
I want to make sure we talk about because one of the things I was again witnessing you from the internet uh, as you went in on Ula, this coffee
Hmm.
shop that is a socially conscious, social justice oriented coffee shop, was how intentional you have been in your language and messaging around it, but also how important it is to create that space of community connection. And it's funny, this is going off the question a little bit, but something called human design is something that I've been using around kind of understanding the energetics. And one of the aspects of
Hmm.
my human design is something that I won't go into the like numbers and letters of it all, but or the degrees of it all, but is that I get a lot of energy from being in a place where other people are. So it doesn't necessarily mean
Yep.
I have to be in deep connection with people, but
Yep.
sitting in a coffee
Just
shop
being
with
around
people
them.
around is
Yeah.
also life affirming, energy giving, as again, a member of this thing and this animal race that we are as humans. So can you talk a little bit about what ULA one, I guess, how that door presented itself to you where you said yes, but also how you've created this space that is very intentionally focused on creating kind of the future and inclusive future that you hope to see and create space for people to kind of create the ripple effect inside but build outside as well.
Yeah, and you're right about so many of these things, like, you know, you don't have to be like in a meeting with somebody in order to feel that energy. Like, people just want to be around people again. And I think that's true. And I also think that we, to the point you made about just not having the energy, like, we are so overwhelmed. People are, there was some article or something that I read that I can't recall the details of, but it was talking about anxiety and how like a record number of people our age, are experiencing like severe anxiety. And that is not, I wish we talked more about this as a society, because we are all going through stuff right now. Like, people are really, really tired. We're like socially exhausted. We've gone through, I've lost people that were close to me over the last 2 years to COVID. And I haven't even been able to have a funeral for them. Like, we haven't had these moments of like true grief. We haven't had moments of recovery. We're trying to bounce back. Our economy is trying to bounce back, and we're just struggling. And I think it's not talked about enough, because when we're hearing these stories of like, oh, people have anxiety, oh, kids are like, like kids are more drugged than ever or whatever. And it's like, because we're not, like, these are real things are happening right now, and we're not really talking about it as much as it should. But
Those are the symptoms of the problem. They're not the problem.
right,
There's a
yes, thank
deeper problem.
you, yes, 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 exactly. um so on that note, I don't know, this is one of those things where people are like, why did you start a coffee shop? Do you have any cafe experience? No, I have absolutely zero cafe experience. I've never worked in a coffee shop. My husband has never worked in a coffee shop. Neither of us knew how to make an espresso. Arguably, we might still not, depending on who you ask. And, we had thought about opening a cafe. This is why, because as we were saying, this isn't just about coffee. This is about connection. This is about community. This is about collective watering holes. This is about creating physical spaces where we can have conversations and dialogues and form bonds with each other and form friendships with each other. And the area that we live in Boston, we live in Roxbury, but depending on who you ask, if you ask a real estate agent, we live in Jamaica Plain, because it is gentrifying significantly, right? So, if you want to sell the houses for 100,000 more, you call it Jamaica Plain. If you want to call it for what the city lines call it, you call it Roxbury. And we're seeing a lot of this change happen. And we're seeing a lot of, Marvin was in like the neighborhood association and saw how people were being kicked out of their homes. And, it's been rough. And something in us was just like, we bought a house here. We sort of started to put down roots, and we were like, there's not really a place where we can just all connect and be together. And so we had thought about starting a coffee shop for that reason. We love to throw parties. So, and I, not because of the party part, but because of like, again, like bringing a community together. And, I grew up with like a really big extended family where people would just like show up with like casseroles, and it was just like loud. And I love that. That's like where
Yeah.
my energy comes from, even though I'm an introvert. And so we thought about it, and then rent in Boston is just crazy, as you know. And so we kind of lost the idea. A couple years later, our main cafe in our neighborhood called Ula went up for sale. And it's a cafe that started in 2007 by two women. They sold it to their coffee roaster in New Harvest, which is based out of Rhode Island. And it always came from like a very social impact driven mission of like community and eco-friendly. Like most of the stuff is like compostable. There's a lot of like vegan and gluten-free options. Like this has always been there. But when the cafe went up for sale, our local one of our local neighborhood leaders reached out to my husband and was like, "Are you still interested in running a coffee shop?" And he said to me, "Hey, this cafe is up for sale. What do you think?" And I was like, "No, no, 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 no. We do not have time. I am running like multiple businesses. You are working full time." He was a management consultant.
Yeah.
You are working full time. We don't have time for this. We don't have energy. We already looked at the business model. The business model will not work. Rent is too expensive.
Yeah.
Well, then we saw the price tag and we
Wow.
were like, maybe we could actually buy this cafe. The coffee roaster, the seller, was selling it for an extremely low amount of money.
Yeah.
To a point where it was clear that he just wanted to pass it on to somebody who cared. He
Mm.
didn't want to pass it on to a chain. He didn't want, and so it just happened that we kind of looked at this and we're like, well, this is a good investment regardless. And then we got teamed up with our business partner, who's now in the process of departing and moving on to her next thing, but she was a chef. And we're
Mhm.
like, okay, well, we have somebody who actually knows what she's doing. And then like I could do the marketing. Marvin could do like event planning or something. And then we could like run this all together. And we made a really compelling case to the roaster, and we bought it. And it has been uh such a journey, and I love it. I actually really, really love it. It's 5 minutes from our house. It is a big operation. We actually, again, not knowing anything about cafes, we were kind of like, oh, how hard can it be? How hard can it be? Well, it's not just a cafe, it's a bakery and a deli and a cafe. So we have about 12 employees working at any given time. So this
Wow.
isn't a coffee shop with like one or two people at the front. This is like
Yeah.
12. You've got like the baker, you've got the savory prep people, you have the steward doing the dishes, you have the sandwich station, you have the front of house, and then you have, like us managing. And so it's a lot. And we've learned a lot. And there have been many, many moments of, kind of like, what in the world are we doing? But I think, to this whole point, the thing we always come back to is this is a cafe that seats 65 people in a place where real estate is smaller and smaller and tighter and tighter. And we are bringing people together and giving people a place where they belong. And I just had an interview with the like university newspaper about it yesterday. And he was kind of like, what's your kind of, what's your rule of like hospitality? Like, what's your, thing? And I said to him, I was like, you know what? Hospitality is very important to us at ULA, absolutely. But there is a very big difference between the hospitality that you get at like a luxury hotel where you feel like super cool and elevated, and the hospitality you get when you go to your mom's house, when you feel like I am fully at home and I have to clean up after myself, and like that's the hospitality that we're creating at ULA. Like, this is your house.
You're part of this
We're
community.
going to treat you like, the important customer that you are. but you are part of this. You have ownership of this. You bus your own table, like you take care of your own stuff, and we are going to be here for you. And we've created so many opportunities to showcase that. We put in like a little free library in the front where people are adding like actually really good books. We have art on the walls that's all local brown and black artists, and like they get 100% of the proceeds of anything that they sell. We instituted a pay it forward wall so that people who have a little bit of extra change can buy stuff in advance for other people who don't. We just started putting these values, manifesting them and creating the city that we want to see and be part of. And I think that's been at the heart of what we've been doing, is like continuing to create space, continuing to create safe spaces, celebrating diversity in a city that doesn't have the best reputation for that, and treating people well and giving them really good food, and being focusing on local. And I don't think of it a lot. People are like, oh, this is so different. You do wonderful during the day, and then you have this cafe, and it's like, yeah, sometimes they're like the exact opposite business. Like with Ula, society has been selling coffee for like thousands of years. So like everyone understands like how much a cup of coffee should be and what the business model is. For Wonderful, we're constantly reinventing this, right? Blogs didn't exist 10 years ago. So these are like two very different businesses that are run in two very different ways, but they both have everything to do with being supported and being seen, and being nurtured, and bringing community together. And that's kind of like the mission that my life, I think, has centered around, is creating spaces where people can feel at home.
Yeah. I oh there's so many pieces to this that all seem to, like, I feel like I love that you kind of put a bow on that, because that was kind of what was happening in my brain. That I was like, oh Beth, like the thing that you're showing is that oftentimes we have this pressure, if we want to create what you just talked about, that we have to throw everything out and start new, that we need to be perfect at every move, that we need to have an intentional moment at like every like
Yeah.
paper towel we
Yeah.
have, every single thing needs to be perfect in order to start, and we
Yep.
need to discover it, right? We can't take what was there and add to it. And I think what
Right.
you've talked about through this entire conversation is the kind of iterative dynamic of being intentional to be like, hey, so I'm going to just open this up a little bit more here, and I'm going to open it up with an invitation for you to come in and
Yep.
create even more space. That it's
Yep.
not, I don't need to be the one person that dictates how this works. I'm going to create
Yep.
that space. I'm going to notice an opportunity and I'm going to try it out, and giving
Yep.
permission for, again, one of my favorite things in this world is witnessing the awe of the human experience, and witnessing what people are able to do when they're given space to be just like unabashedly human in a wonderful way. Because I think oftentimes we're shown that as like being awful to one another, which,
Yeah.
call me an optimist and maybe blind optimist or
Yeah.
naive optimist, but like I actually don't believe that's what we're programmed for initially.
Yeah.
It's how we're conditioned.
Yeah.
But being able to open these spaces and say, hey, what do you have to say? Hey, you matter. Hey, you belong
Yeah.
here. Hey, if you have a little bit extra, you can give to these people. Not literally, not a big deal. No one's going to pressure you otherwise, but like, here's an opportunity to try it if you want to, and
Yeah.
see, watch and witness how this builds a community. Watch and witness what it is to have a stake in the game, where it's like, hey, you know what? This is my community coffee shop. I'll move this over here. This is the home that I get to pop into. This is the place where I have staked some element of my identity and community that I'm going to carry forward outside of this place. And how transformative those little moments are, even though they're not little, that
Yeah.
you don't need to be like, let me start a brand new campaign for a brand new thing and do it differently than it's ever been done. It's, how can I be in the spaces and the places where I know people are and what they need, and create opportunities for them to shine, not
Yeah.
for it to be like, this is the only way we do. So I think there is nuance that you bring up, right? And space creation and invitation is a huge part of what I've been hearing from your story. The last thing I want to say is, how can people, so first I hear book, I heard a little birdie told me that there might be a podcast in the future. I know that there's your creator summit and hopefully Wanderfest coming up. And if people want to be part of Wonderful, how can they connect with you keep tabs on all the amazing things and ways. And and if you're in Boston, in and around Boston area, Ula all day.
Come to Ula, right?
How can people connect with you?
So let's see how to make this easy. So first of all, following me on Instagram definitely helps. It's Maximum Beth. So you can find me there. Wonderful is She's Wonderful, SHES, Wonderful with an A. And then Ula is Ula Cafe, ULACAFE Cafe. So that's where you can find, usually we put all of our announcements there. You are right. I have all sorts of projects going on that my husband is like, why are you doing this again? Didn't you just say you were really stressed out? And I was like, yeah, but it's so fun. I have to do it. So here's what's happening. I have a podcast coming out in March called 85%. 85%, if we all remember, is the percentage of decisions that women make in travel, and yet they are not represented in travel. So we're talking about it. You can sign up for my podcast by going to my website, bethsantos.com. That's easy. And then I think it's just /podcast. So, but you can find it on the site. The book as well, you can sign up to be notified when the book is out. I'm going to be going on tour in 2024, doing lots of speaking things. If you have a book club that you want me to be present for, an opportunity, let me know. I'll be doing a lot of promotion for that. If you want to sign up for Wonderful, the handle matches the URL. So sheswonderful.com. You can sign up. We have a traveler membership, a creator membership. We actually launched a small business membership for anyone who's a travel advisor or a startup founder or something like that, who wants emotional support, but also business coaching. So that's at sheswonderful.com. And then WITS is our creator summit that we have every year. It's happening in Puerto Rico in May. It's going to be amazing. You can go to WIT Summit, WIT Summit.com to sign up and get a ticket. It's like nothing you'll ever go to. You're going to absolutely love it. It's phenomenal. And then, anytime you're so Ula is in Jamaica Plain. So anytime you're in Jamaica Plain, just stop by Ula. We're in the brewery building. We're actually next door to Sam Adams. So that's a pretty good way to give people, if they're going on a brewery tour, they can come and get some lunch afterward. It's ulacafe.com. But yes, in case you didn't want to write down all of those URLs, just find me on Instagram, Maximum Beth, and you can see all of my stuff there.
Nice. And we'll have all this in the show notes. So if anybody needs that, there's a link in the description.
A whole Cheesecake Factory menu.
Just click that. Yeah. So you don't have to remember all those things. And also you can. So the time that you spent today, the wisdom that you shared today, next level. I'm so grateful for you for being here. And also, as you mentioned, we could have talked about each of these things for 6 hours. So I'm so excited to bear witness to all the amazing stuff that you've got going on, and hopefully the ability to reconnect in the future on all this. So thank you for taking the time today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nikki. It's been great.
Such a wonderful conversation, right? Beth is next level. Just so you know, before we even started recording, we talked for a while and caught up, and we had so many great things to say that this happens a lot of times with my amazing guests. I'm like, hold on. We need to add this we need to have this recorded so the audience can hear this amazing wisdom that you're sharing. And so I hope that you're walking away from this conversation full of inspiration to kind of chart a path forward of being exposed to new and different circumstances, to being that reciprocal traveler, to adding to your own repertoire what it is to be in and part of a community, to be giving back, but also be soaking in the magic of what it is to be connected with other human beings, especially after the last few years of feeling like it might not be safe to be around others. If there's anything that you want to hear about, anything you want me to reach out to Beth on, definitely reach out to us. You can go to nikkiinnocent.com/podcast. The link is in the show notes of wherever you are listening to this podcast, and let us know if there's any topic you want us to cover. Of course, please let us know. If you have any guests in mind that you think would be great for the podcast, let us know that as well. You can do all that over on nikkiinnocent.com/podcast. If you haven't, and you've been listening to this podcast for a while, or if this is your first episode, please do rate and review the podcast. It's super helpful. It at least makes me feel like I'm in conversation with you. And for me personally, This podcast is great because it gives me the opportunity to be in conversation with folks that I may never meet. And so if you provide kind of your ratings, reviews, or even comment back to us on social media or through the form on our website, trust me, it is received, it is appreciated, because it is so important to have your say in this as well. So I appreciate your time and your energy and your ears, because there are so many places that our time is being pulled and our energy and our attention is being pulled right now, and I'm just so grateful that you found this to be important enough to take some time to listen to. I will catch you on the next episode, and I wish you well.